My neighbor revealed my wife's secret and offered me revenge in the darkest way possible. The knock came at 12:47 a.m. 3 taps, slow, measuring, almost polite. I was awake anyway. I rarely slept those days. Something in the air of my house kept me restless, like the walls were whispering secrets I couldn't quite hear. My wife, Aisha, wasn't home. She'd left hours earlier, claiming she needed fresh air. At midnight? With her phone switched off? I didn't ask questions, not out loud. Inside, though, my mind was a shape with teeth. So when that knock echoed through the house again, something in my chest tightened. I opened the door a few inches. My neighbor, Rahil, stood there, calm, expressionless, too composed for someone standing outside a man's home at nearly 1 a.m. He didn't greet me, didn't step in, didn't blink much. He simply said, "Hamza, there's something you need to know about your wife." The way he said it, quiet, almost careful, felt like the ground beneath me shifted. Like he had been rehearsing this moment and finally decided I was ready to hear it. My fingers tightened on the doorframe. I waited, breathing slow, controlled. He looked over his shoulder as if making sure no one else was listening, then leaned a fraction closer. "She's not where you think she is tonight." A pause. Heavy, deliberate. "She's with someone." Something cold spread through my ribs, like frost forming on glass. But outside, I only nodded. Rahil studied me for a moment, perhaps expecting me to shout or deny it. But I stayed silent. Silence has always been my sharpest weapon. Finally, he whispered, "If you want the truth, follow me." Then he turned and walked away, not waiting for my answer. I didn't grab a coat, I didn't turn off the lights. I simply stepped out into the night and closed the door behind me, leaving the warm air of my home trapped inside. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels unnatural, like the calm right before a storm decides where to land. Rahil was already halfway down the lane, hands in his pockets, steps slow and thoughtful. And for the first time since the day I married Aisha, I felt something inside me dying. Not pain, not anger, understanding. A calm, crystal-clear understanding that my life was about to split into a before and an after, and there was no going back. The night air bit into my skin as we walked. Rahil kept his distance ahead of me, like a guide leading a man through a graveyard. Maybe he was. We didn't speak for nearly 5 minutes, but in that silence, my thoughts filled every step. Aisha, her recent distance, the late-night walks, the sudden need for privacy, the way she guarded her phone like it held explosives. I remembered the softness in her voice when she used to say my name, how it changed slowly, days, weeks, months, until speaking to me seemed like an inconvenience. I remembered anniversaries she forgot, calls she ignored, messages she left unseen. The truth wasn't surprising, only the timing. Finally, Rahil broke the silence. "I didn't want to be the one to tell you," he said, not turning around. "But I couldn't watch you, living like this." I didn't respond. Words would have been too small for what I felt. He stopped near the edge of the neighborhood, under a flickering streetlight. Its weak glow painted him in a shaky halo, one that made his face look older, heavier. He hesitated before speaking again. "They've been meeting for months." The words didn't shock me. They settled quietly, fitting into the empty spaces already hollowed out inside me. "Where?" My voice sounded distant, even to myself. Rahil pointed across the road, toward a dim, narrow street leading into the commercial area. Shops closed, lights off. But one building at the far end had a faint glow leaking from behind its curtains, a rented flat. I felt my pulse slow instead of quicken. Slow meant control. Slow meant thinking. Slow meant surviving. Every instinct in me, trained by years of reading people carefully, whispered the same thing. This is real. This is happening. And it changes everything. Raheel finally looked me in the eyes. I'm sorry, Hamza. I didn't want you to find out this way. I studied him. The tension in his jaw, the sincerity in his voice, the discomfort in his stance. Most people lie with their eyes. But his were clear, almost mournful. Still, something about him felt strange. Too invested, too emotional for a neighbor who barely spoke to me before this week. But that was a question for later. Right now, there was only one truth I needed. Was my wife betraying me? Or was this all some twisted misunderstanding? The only way to know was to walk into that building. I didn't follow Raheel immediately. Instead, I walked back home with a strange calmness, like my body knew the storm was already overhead and there was no point running. Inside the house, I sat on the edge of the bed. Her perfume still lingered on the sheets. A scent I once loved, now it felt like a stain. I picked up her hairbrush. A single long hair wrapped around its bristles. Something inside me twisted, not from sadness, but from clarity. If she was lying, the truth would show. Always did. I opened my laptop. No shaking hands, no trembling breath, just precision. Call logs, cell tower locations, past messages she thought she deleted, old cloud backups she forgot were synced to my email. I wasn't spying, not then, not before, but today felt like the day everything was allowed. Piece by piece, the picture formed. Multiple calls to an unknown number at odd hours. Small payments to a same-day room rental service. A second email account linked to her main phone. Nothing explosive, nothing dramatic, but enough. Enough to see the cracks. Enough to know Raheel was not imagining things. I kept digging. Receipts, bank transfers, taxi rides, everything told the same story. Aisha had been living a second life, carefully tucked between the hours I thought she was working late. The anger came slower than I expected, more like a pulse than a roar. Then something unexpected caught my eye. A message from her to an unsaved number. Tonight, same place, same time. Don't be late. He suspects nothing. He. I stared at that word longer than the rest. Something cold slithered up my spine. A new kind of betrayal, a deeper one. She wasn't cheating because she was unhappy. She was cheating because she thought I was blind, and she enjoyed that. That realization burned, not with heat, but with ice. A slow, cutting freeze. I took one slow breath, stood up, and walked to the mirror. I barely recognized the reflection looking back. A calm, hollow version of myself. A man stripped down to nothing but intention. I didn't confront her, not yet. Confrontation ends things early. Truth destroys them completely. So I spent the next 2 days gathering more evidence. Phone recording software, data recovery tools, cloud snapshots, a discrete DNA test kit for a suspicion I never thought I'd have. The baby she lost last year, was it even mine? She cried for weeks. I held her through it, believed her grief was real. But now, nothing felt certain. I mailed the test quietly, no emotion attached. Just a simple return address and a question I already feared I knew the answer to. Then I waited. Not for hope, not for closure, for confirmation. And when the envelope arrived 4 days later, thin and harmless looking, I knew. Tonight would be the end of my old life. The apartment door was slightly ajar when I reached it. The same one Raheel had pointed to that first night. No lights on inside, but faint movement filtered through the gap. Voices. 2. One belonged to Aisha. The other, a man I had never heard before. My pulse didn't rise. Not even once. I stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind me. They didn't notice me. Or maybe they were too busy whispering in the dark to care. Aisha sat on the edge of the couch, hair messy, lips swollen with someone else's touch. The man leaned against her shoulder, whispering something that made her laugh softly, the kind of laugh she never gave me anymore. It wasn't the sight that broke me, it was the sound. Her happiness, with someone else. I waited until the man stood up to pour her a drink. Then I turned on the lights, bright, harsh, unforgiving. Aisha froze. The glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. The man stepped back like I was a ghost, dripping blood. My voice came out steady, colder than the tile beneath my feet. I received the DNA results today. Aisha's lips parted. A small, broken sound escaped her. The man looked between us, confused. I kept going. The baby wasn't mine. Silence. Complete. Suffocating. Almost peaceful. Aisha covered her mouth with trembling hands. The man whispered, "Aisha, what is he talking about?" She didn't answer. I stepped closer. Not angry, not shaking. Just delivering truth the way a surgeon delivers fatal news. "You told him you were on birth control." A gasp from the man, then a curse. Aisha tried to reach for me. I stepped back. "Don't." One word, sharp enough to cut her fingers before they touched me. She broke. Her knees buckled and she hit the floor with a choked sob. I didn't move to help her. The power had already shifted, and she felt it. The man ran out of the apartment after grabbing his shirt, muttering, "You said your marriage was dead. You said—" But he didn't finish. The door slammed behind him. Aisha remained on the floor, shoulders shaking. I stood in front of her, studying the woman I once loved, as if she were a stranger who had wandered into my life by mistake. She lifted her tear-streaked face. "Hamza, please, just talk to me." I handed her the envelope. She took it with trembling fingers, opened it, and read. Each second that passed stripped another layer of color from her face. When she reached the last line, she dropped the papers like they burned her. I never wanted, I thought." Excuses, half-formed, worthless. I raised a hand, and she swallowed the rest of her sentence instantly. "I am not here for answers," I said. "I'm here to return something that belongs to you." She looked up, confused. I slid my wedding ring off, placed it gently on the glass shards near her knee. The sound it made, metal on broken pieces, felt symbolic. Final. Aisha crawled forward, sobbing, "We can fix this, please." I stepped backward, out of her reach again. "No," I whispered. "Not loud, not cruel, just final. You broke something that cannot be repaired." She pressed her forehead to the floor. Her cries shook the room, maybe even the walls. But I felt nothing. No pity, no hate, only clarity. I walked past her, stopped at the doorway, looked back one last time. She was still on the ground, small, shattered, drowning in the truth she thought she could hide. That was the revenge. Not shouting, not hitting, not exposing her publicly. Just letting her face the truth without the shield of lies she had built for months. A quiet destruction. The kind that stays forever. I walked home slowly. The night air tasted different, lighter somehow. The burden I carried for months dissolved with each step. Inside my house, everything looked the same, yet nothing was. I sat on the same edge of the same bed where all this began. The sheets still smelled like her, but now the scent meant nothing. Just a memory attached to a person who never truly belonged to me. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for years. People think revenge is loud, explosive, but the most devastating revenge is truth. Truth delivered calmly, without emotion, without rage. Truth that forces the guilty to confront themselves. And she would, for the rest of her life. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. A quiet smile touched my lips, not of joy, not of triumph, but of freedom. A freedom that came not from punishing her, but from no longer carrying the weight of loving her. As I turned off the lights, one final thought settled into my bones. Cold, satisfying, unshakable. I didn't lose her. She lost me. And that was the end. The quietest, coldest, most final ending a betrayal could earn.
How could you do this?